So this is an overview of, in general, how Laser Fiche works and how it interacts with the cannons, the Portal 3, which was the old file share server, how the individual interacts with that, and then finally how a file gets into the Laserfiche RT scan 01 server. So the way that the system works is that the cannon, when someone scans from the cannon, will send that scan to Portal 3, the server. Now on that server, we do have a script that runs and it's scheduled to run so that anything older than 30 days is cleaned out. So users know that this is not a place to store things permanently. It's just temporary while we're processing it. Once the user goes to the cannon and scans it, that they then return to their desk, open up the Laserfiche application, and the Laserfiche application has a default directory looking at Portal 3, and the Laserfiche application, in a sense, will, once the user identifies the file that they want that happens to reside on Portal 3, the client application, in a sense, pulls that file off of Portal 3 and then pushes it to RTC scan 01 with the appropriate metadata that's there. In addition, we have configured the client to then remove the file off of Portal 3 so that it can then clear up that server. Lydia, do I have that correct?
Yes, let's just make sure that RTC Scan 01, we all understand, is the Laserfiche server.
Perfect. Okay, so what had happened recently, and this could happen again, is that Portal 3 went down. And so we had to rebuild that server. And what we found out was that when we rebuilt the server, things weren't working. The reason is because the cannon didn't know where to send scans to for that new server. So the two tasks that were required for this to be resolved was the new server needs to have the user LF scan, and that user has to have privileges to write to all directories under the new server name, print services, and I've got a typo. It should say /LF scan. By doing that one, now the cannon can talk to this new server, which we have created called Prime FS1. The other thing that needs to be configured is that the cannon has to have each of the address book entries configured to write to the correct place. It needs to reference the new server name. If we would have used the same host name from the old server to the new server, that should not have been necessary. In our case, we did change the host name. Again, what happens is a person would then open up the Laserfiche client, and then they would pull that file off the new Prime FS1 server, and then it would push it with the appropriate metadata tags onto RTC scan 01, which is the Laserfiche server. Now, this doesn't automatically happen. What's needed for this to happen is, number one, that user now needs to be given access to their appropriate directory on the new server. The directory structures that we're using is that the directory should correspond to their Active Directory account. So for example, my Active Directory account is jcarrillo. I should have a folder on Prime FS1 as jcarrillo, and I personally, my AD account should have access to that folder. This prevents people from seeing each other's scans. And then finally, as a minor note, is that we have to actually go into the client for each of the users so that their default directory is now pointing to Prime FS1, because it was prior pointing to the old server, Portal 3. Now that the old server is gone, they would have gotten an error saying that's not available. Once those two things are done, then the end user should be able to proceed.
Okay, so from a technology person's point of view, I have two file folders here. One is the Prime FS1 LF scan, which is the direct one. And the second one is the DFS name. The DFS name is what I'm going to be using on Laserfiche client, and this direct name is what I'm going to be using in order to provide security, because I can't do it on the DFS name. Am I making that understandable, Jim?
Let's go ahead and go through it, and you'll be able to
Okay.
demonstrate what you mean.
So I'm going to be using my own AD account. So under El Cabrera, I'm going to select properties. I'm going to select security, and I'm going to edit and add my AD account, check name, and I'll select the correct one, which is the user, and say OK. I'm going to say OK. And then I will add or allow modify, because this allows the AD account to be able to remove the file by the client. And then I say OK. Now that I have provided the security, I'm ready now to enter the default path into the application itself. So I'm going to make sure I copy this path, go to the application, I've opened it, and now I'm going to select the scanner. And if you notice under the search directory, it's pointing to portal 3.
Mm-hmm.
And now that's what we have to replace. Usually, I don't really just copy and paste here on the search directory. I do it properly by going to the scanner setup, replace this with a new path that I just copy from the file folder. Make sure that it's saying delete original pages so that once the file has been processed using this module, it will delete it from the file server. Say OK. You've noticed the search directory now has changed to that path that I inserted, and I'm set.
If by chance the El Cabrera directory did not exist, would the help desk then just create the directory for the person that's having issues?
Correct. If for some reason that the Canon copier has already been added with that one-touch profile for the user, and that the directory here was not present during that time, the Canon copier will still create that folder structure or that name, that folder for that user. However, it won't have the security, so that the help desk would just need to add the AD security.